Hello, my name is Dan Dyck, and you're listening to Tales from the Mennonite Heritage Archives, a show about people, places, and events from Mennonite history. Thanks for tuning in. In a past episode, I spoke with Sara Dyck, an assistant at the MHA. She told me all about Helen Martins, the first Mennonite woman to achieve a PhD in music. I was fascinated by the work Sara does. I wanted to know what excites her about history, how she describes her work to her friends, you're going to want to hear that, and how her work helps people find what they're looking for. Sara, tell us how long you've worked at the Mennonite Heritage Archives and how archivist Conrad Stace here at the MHA sparked your interest in Mennonite history.
I think it's just over 4 years now that I've been working in the archives. And it started with my lifelong interest in history. I always wanted to know more about history and the past and people's stories. I went to a Mennonite high school, Westgate Mennonite Collegiate here in Winnipeg. Conrad actually came to my high school many years ago, and he did a presentation on what kind of treasures we hold in the archives. If you want to know about your history, this is where in Winnipeg you can find it. And I thought that was really cool, the stuff that he had to show us. And so when I started at CMU a few years later, I learned that I could apply for a student job in the archives. I could be surrounded by the history that I loved so much. And so that encouraged me to try. And it all spiraled from there.
What kind of skills or knowledge do you think are important in archival work?
For archival work specifically, I think it's important to have a good appreciation for history, even the mundane parts. I mean, there are plenty of fascinating and unique stories that I come across, as I work on things. But more often, there are letters that don't say anything interesting, or there are newspapers that we have no immediate reason to keep, no fascinating headline that jumps off the page and tells us this is an important part of history. But they're still a valuable record of the past and a piece of history that may come in handy in the future. And so you have to have an appreciation even for the little parts that don't immediately jump out at you, I think.
How does your work help people find what they need when they visit the archives?
There's a lot of organization that goes into the role of an archivist or, more of an assistant like me. And that helps people if they come into the archives knowing that, all right, there's a collection here. I know that my grandfather donated it. I want to dig it out and read through it and find out what it says. Then we help with retrieving it. We can point to where it is on the list and go, okay, I see that your grandfather donated it this many years ago. We put it in these box numbers. Let me go grab it for you. And that just streamlines the process of searching really easily. If they don't know what they're looking for, particularly if they come in with a question and they say, I want to know more about farming techniques in the 30s, then our organization can help them narrow down which collections might help them answer that question, right? We can look through the descriptions that we've created and say, all right, well, here's a diary from a farmer's wife in the 30s and 40s that might talk about the techniques they used, the crops they were growing, the weather that year. There really is a lot of sort of direction and guiding in an archivist's role that helps people use the archives to their full capability.
So give me a quick overview of what specifically you do with materials that come into the archives.
Most of the time, I get handed a stack of boxes and maybe a sheet of paper that has some of the context notes on it, and I get told, go. And so there's a little bit of research that happens right away. Who was this person? When did they live? What other context can I glean that helps me understand the material I'm looking at? And then it's sifting through the boxes and reading things and trying to piece together what I have in front of me and what the best way to store and organize it is so that we can find it again later, so that a researcher combing through it can understand what they're looking at and isn't kind of overwhelmed by a jumbled mess of papers from this or that. And then at the end of it all, we put it into files, put it into boxes, and we write up a finding aid, which includes a lot of that historical context, some of the description of how the collection is organized so that people can find the right box, the right file really easily. And the finding aid goes into a list and a box goes onto the shelf and it sits there waiting to be used.
It must feel like a little rainbow in your heart the day somebody from overseas phones about something in someone's collection that you organized and you described and you know something about.
Absolutely. It always gives me a little thrill to know that I contributed in some small way behind the scenes. I don't need my name anywhere, right? I don't need a thank you in their next book. Of course not. But just to have that knowledge for myself that I could help them really means a lot.
What do you tell your friends that you do in the archives?
Well, do you want the real answer or the right answer?
I want the real answer.
I tell them I solve the problems that dead people cause me.
And now the real answer?
The real answer, the one you're probably looking for, I tell them that I respond to researchers' requests. I find articles in newspapers for them. I scan photos to send to them. I pull boxes for when they want to make an appointment and come into the archives to do some work. Other than that, sometimes I'm stuffing envelopes of our publication, the Mennonite Historian, so that we can send it out to our subscribers. And other times I'm working on larger projects. I'm archiving a collection or I'm scanning text documents to digitize them so that we can publish them online.
I want to get back to your real answer because it does actually raise a question. What kind of problems do dead people cause archivists?
Well, they leave us all their stuff and expect us to do something with it. Some people... Every collection is different. Every collection has its problems and its benefits. Some collections come into us quite organized already, just because of that's the way that the person lived. If they were perhaps a teacher or a professor, they were already fairly organized in their research work, right? And so it comes to us pre-organized in a sense, and we can go through it pretty easily and get a sense of what's there, how to group it, how to describe it, how it all fits together. Other collections come into us and they are not so organized. They are, bundles of letters that we have to sort out by sender, by location, by topic, perhaps. Everything depends on what is in the collection itself, of course. But there are some collections that we think of more fondly than others in terms of how easy it is to make sense of what's there.
What surprises your friends when you tell them what you do?
I think a lot of their surprise comes from the variety of what I get to do in the archives. And a lot of that has to do with the specific archive that I work in. Because the Mennonite Heritage Archives is a smaller institution, there isn't really space for anyone to specialize so much that they're only ever doing one thing. So I get to play with a lot of different things in the archives. I'm scanning things, I'm stuffing envelopes, I'm archiving collections, I'm digitizing things, sometimes I'm playing host at the front desk, asking people if I can help them with whatever they're looking for, getting them started on their research before turning them over to Conrad. And I don't know that I'd get that opportunity somewhere else. And I don't think my friends are always expecting me to have my fingers in so many pies at once. But I wouldn't change it for the world.
Do any of your friends get excited about the potential of them also doing something like this?
One of my friends actually works in the library here at CMU, and so she's quite familiar with, not with archives, but the CMU library and the MH archives work quite closely together, thanks to being on the same campus. And so I think when we get a particularly interesting old donation of books, we have a couple of Martyr's Mirrors, and we work with the Martyr's Mirrors to scan the images and make them available to people. She gets really excited about that. The CMU library also has, again, a really old Martyr's Mirror that us in the archives salivate over.
For listeners who don't know what the Martyr's Mirror is, can you say something about what that is?
Oh, yeah, of course. The Martyr's Mirror is a martyrology. It's a chronicle of all of the Anabaptist martyrs from mostly focused around the 1500s. And anytime we get a chance to work with it, we're always excited. So, yeah, she really is right there with me in her love of history.
From the perspective of your work, what advice would you give listeners who might be considering donating family records to the archives?
I think I would tell them that your knowledge about the stuff that you have is incredibly valuable and it's essentially irreplaceable. As archivists, the more context that you can give us, the more information about what went into the material that you're handing to us, the better. So if you're giving us a stack of letters, let's say, don't just tell us that, oh, these letters were written between my grandparents back before they got married. Tell us, for example, that your grandfather went to go work on a farm in another province as an alternative to military service in World War II. While he was there, he met a woman that he kept up a correspondence with when he returned home until they eventually decided to get married. Or if you're giving us a box of family records, don't just say, all right, my mother's birth certificate is in here. Tell us that your mother's birth certificate says she was born in Russia, but that actually she was born on the boat as they traveled between Russia and Canada. Little stories like that can do a lot to tell us how to treat the material that we're working with and how best to describe it so that we can make it accessible to researchers in the future. And it doesn't always have to be like a long essay of family stories either. Something as simple as writing names and dates on the backs of photographs so that we don't have to try and track down the faces and the times in those photos can be really, really valuable. And so the more context, the better.
Have you ever come across a love story in the archives?
Oh boy, yes. Yes, I have. Maybe not quite in the way you're thinking, but this is one of my favorite stories from working in the archives. I once went out with Conrad to visit the apartment of a man who was donating quite a few boxes to us at the time. There must have been 30 or so that we hauled out of his apartment and brought back to the archives on a borrowed van. As we were going through the boxes, we found 300 Amish romance novels in and among the other books and papers. And I had no idea that romance novels about the Amish community were so popular, but they must be because there's at least 300 here. And we looked at each other and thought, what are we going to do with these? They're not something that really fits into our purview of Mennonite history, partially because we don't store a lot of published books. Those can be found elsewhere, right? Unless they're, now out of print, and then we might store a copy. But these are contemporary novels that you can find pretty much anywhere. That's not really something we keep. And of course, we don't keep a lot of Amish records either. And there's 300 of them, which is another concern. We do not have the kind of space to keep 300 novels every time someone donates them to us. And so we looked at each other and we thought, well, we can ask the CMU library if they want to keep a couple, just as sort of an exemplar of what's out there if you want to do research, right? Because that could be an area of study for someone if they wanted to look at, an English major who was researching different genres and stuff like that. We thought, this might be something, so we'll give a smattering to the library. And the librarian at CMU, the head librarian, Vic Fraze, he sent a message out to all the English professors and asked, is this something that, we should keep? How many do you think we should keep? And I get a good laugh out of it, but maybe he's a little dismayed. The answer came back, keep them all. And so the CMU library currently holds 300 Amish romance novels that we got as a donation one day. And they're there if you ever feel like reading one. If for study or for pleasure, we're happy to check them out.
Thank you, Sara, for the fun conversation. It was a real treat to get to know you better.
Hello, I'm Conrad Stace, the archivist at the Mennonite Heritage Archives. Your donations help preserve and share stories like the one you just heard. To send a gift, visit our website at mharchives.ca and click on Support, or give us a call at 204-560-1998. Thanks also to our partners, Canadian Mennonite University, the Centre for Transnational Mennonite Studies, Mennonite Church Canada, and Golden West Radio.
Thanks to the Tales team of Conrad Stace, Graham Unruh, and Kaylee Dyck for their work on the program. Tales from the Mennonite Heritage Archives will be back soon with more stories about people, places, and events from Mennonite history. Thanks for listening.